Bueno, vamos a aprovechar estos minutos.
Let's take these minutes to share video with you. A video we have been working on with CAF. So we'll leave you to watch the video, then we'll resume with the afternoon activities.
Natural. Es natural que todo cambie, que todo crezca, se transforme. Es natural que la energía nos transforme. Es natural transitar el cambio, el equilibrio.
It is natural to find balance. It is natural for gas to be the road to that change. In a world where energy is no longer power but purpose, along that way, fair energy transition, natural gas comes up as a bridge between what we are and what we want to be. It's a matter of vision, sustainability, and balance, because as we develop other natural resources as hydrogen, lithium, solar, or wind, gas gives us time. It gives us support, it gives us a solid foundation to move forward without going back. Today in Latin America and the Caribbean, more than 160 million people have access to power thanks to natural gas. Homes, hospitals, industry, trade, or markets. Also, the region progresses with its interconnection plan, with its vision of diversification, and it fulfills its duty as a key complement in the renewable transition. Power that is where it's needed, nearby, reliable. Natural gas has an advantage that the world now values more than ever. It emits up to 50% less CO2 and 25% less carbon than diesel. And only that, if infrastructure already exists, it can be adapted, because what transports gas today, tomorrow can transport hydrogen. From Mexico down to Patagonia, natural gas is there, supporting the lives of millions of people with more than 100,000 kilometers of gas pipes in the region and regional integration projects. Gas is also a force for union, strengthens cooperation, and makes power a pillar of shared sovereignty. Our region gives us a unique delight, generosity, and diversity in natural resources, and natural gas is a transition power which helps us to care for each other, to integrate, and to move forward without leaving anybody behind. Because when the wind stops, the sun hides. Gas is there, not to compete with renewables, but to make them feasible. And natural gas allows us to progress without sacrificing development. It gives us time and the foundation to build the future. The Latin American Power Association and CAF, the Latin American and Caribbean Development Bank, via a joint effort with countries in the region, is pushing for this power integration process, promoting technical dialogue, developing infrastructure, and cooperation among countries in the region. It is the resource that can take the cleanest power to rural schools, to small industries that boost local economy, to a hospital so that it never has no power. The resource will accompany the world as it changes. That is also a transition, that is future, and that is caring. It is transforming without losing stability, innovating without generating more inequality, and along that way, natural gas is not part of the problem, it is part of the solution. Power that connects the present and the future, which moves turbines, motors, cities, but also hope. It is natural gas. Power to transform, power to transition, power to dream. Now we are ready and back to know the initiatives and commitments from companies in oil and gas to reduce methane emissions. We invite as a moderator Elena Alfaro from the Regional Association of Oil and Gas and Renewables Association in Latin America and the Caribbean, more well known as ARPEL, and our panelists, José Carlos de Pierola from ERM, Juan Carlos López from SierraCol Energy, Omar Bueno from Repsol Exploration Peru, and Ana Villarroel from Petroecuador. Well, this is a nice challenge. After lunch, we'll try for you not to fall asleep. Know that we have much to tell companies in the sector are working much on managing methane emissions. Often it's a problem to communicate this and to convey it to the public effectively, so we help to aid in that sense with this panel. We know and we are very aware that we need to double down on efforts to fulfill the Paris Agreement, and that we are working strongly, both from the private sector and the public. And our work actually is very much focused on measuring, reporting, verificating emissions, apart from mitigation, and seeking also the detection and repair of leaks, minimizing flaring and venting, of course, among many other initiatives. For that, today we have many panelists. First, we have the company ERM that will give us a different vision from without the sector, but with a more global and regional perspective. And as collaborator with our sector as well in this goal, we also have SierraCol, Repsol, and Petroecuador, representing different angles of our sector in the region. The mode, there will be questions. Perhaps we will look at one or two slides, but mainly this will be a talk. And I would like to begin by asking a first question to José Carlos, who, with his more regional vision and from without the industry, can tell us how he sees the outlook for methane, particularly in the region, and how ERM is contributing to reduce its emissions. Thank you so much, Irene. It's an honor to be here before you, accompanying you in this such important event on a gas that I feel is still somewhat hidden. When we discuss decarbonization, when I was to talk decarbonization with some companies in Peru or outside of Peru, in Latin America, part of the team that works with me, we are always aiming to CO2 and so little to CH4. And this is because many of the processes, and let's not forget Peru is a mining country mainly, we have no coal mines. Perhaps in Colombia is where there can be more of a gaze on carbon matters in the more, but neither are we a country which has methane production due to agriculture. It is not as high, really. However, I believe that in the region, there's already a significant stride on decarbonization via some frameworks such as TCFD, this work group, to open up the information on how we are contributing with regards to emissions. Many companies are working on that. Countries such as Chile and Colombia already have it as part of their regulation, and they are making progress on that. Peru does not yet have it, and very little progress is being made in that sense. So that kind of framework helps us to have order on how to focus and how to work, how to identify the problem. On a more global level, World Bank research identified that less than 2% of funding for the reduction of climate change emissions is focusing on methane. And that tells us that funding can be an issue that is not being tackled properly. And on the other hand, I also saw a report from the International Energy Agency, which states that by 2023, there had been a significant increase. Satellite imagery analysis was made, and they saw that there was a major increase in methane leaks in the region. So there's a challenge there because also on the other end, you need to, well, the consumer begins pushing and having more, to exert more pressure on companies because there's open information on how they are operating with regards to reporting on how they are going about their decarbonization and where they are focusing it. Surely this morning, unfortunately I was not present, there was some information on how or what is Peru's position and the more, but there again, the data, I believe, is the challenge that we have before us and that we need to advance on. And this is not only on the public sector, but mostly, though it also falls on the private sector, and I will later tell you how this is being tackled, because undoubtedly one of the things we are doing at ERM is to track and support private enterprise for them to identify where these gaps are, to say where the leaks are and how to improve technology, understanding inward what kind of changes must happen in the institution in order to tackle these challenges, which represent some technological changes, as technological changes are not made by machines but people. So that's a people effort. And so just making a parallel, in the mining industry, there's an international council on metals and mining. Many major mining corporations have signed an agreement to be able to reach net zero by 2050. Undoubtedly, it's a different industry. It has another process, another challenge, but that willingness has existed. So I believe that is something that we would have to look into, how to tackle it from the perspective of methane, particularly, since we're on this matter, and to see how we can achieve this kind of agreement where not only is the private company there, so that we can also engage governments, academia that is so important for research that we so much need, and especially to call the attention on the importance to tackle methane issues, which is 28 or 25 more polluting than CO2. So a small methane leak will multiply much with regards to how it will be contributing negatively to climate change. So I believe here lies a very important problem that we need to begin tackling.
Thank you, José Carlos. And now that you're mentioning about commitments or pledges, I would like to hear from on the people on what commitments they have received on methane commitments to reduce methane emissions, and how are we implementing this? Thank you. Yes, my name is Ana Villarroel. I thank the invitation to this event, and I appreciate everybody that has made this possible. Ecuador, as a country, starting from 2006, in the framework on taking care of the environment, and as well as the work that has happened with other countries in fighting climate change, we have made several pledges. We have had a commitment for global methane reduction, and it's important to mention that in 2016, we signed the Paris Agreement. Ecuador had adhered to this initiative. Ecuador, in 2021, has launched the plan towards decarbonization of our country. Petroecuador has been the executor, considering that the oil market is one of the ones of higher hierarchy, and this is one of the main executor roles. In Ecuador, in 2022, we have created a decarbonization committee. In this committee, there was a corporation decarbonization plan. This was like an umbrella that helped us with the initiatives that we have in order to reduce the greenhouse emissions. Particularly for methane, in 2023, we adhere to OEMP 2.0 from the UN. This enabled us to perform a methane inventory record from a company point of view. This has been a challenge because we needed to understand each one of the challenges of the companies. We established a baseline in year 2023. As an absolute goal, we have a percentage of 30% of reduction from this baseline in 2023 up to 2028, which means that our baseline, which is 51 kilotons of equivalent CO2, needs to be reduced at a 30% up to 2028. This is a firm commitment from our company. We decided to use our own resources and external resources in order to comply with this. All of our assets are in level 3 at a 50%. And the challenge would be to get into level 4 and 5 according to the OEMP guidelines. And actually, that's the commitment that we have regarding methane from Petroecuador. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, by the way. I am from SierraCol Energy. This is a company in Colombia that was conformed once we sold some assets. Why is it important as a background? Because large of the commitments that we have result from Occidental having very good infrastructure. Occidental was the company that sold the asset. So the engineering was of high tech. Once we were acquired by the Carlyle Group in 2020, there was a decarbonization agenda that was included. And in such agenda, what we were looking for was to reduce our methane emissions. These were about 7,200,000 cubic tons of emissions. And as you know, in order to reduce these emissions, we were considering 50% up to 2023 of reduction. And the 4 pillars that were going to help us to do that was energetic transition, in order to use or to transit from fossil fuels to others. We were consuming more than megawatts in all of our operations. The third pillar was decreasing fugitive emissions, and the fourth included the suppression of the flares. So the last pillars were focused into methane, as you can see. So there was a huge project to tackle those 2 pillars. From Resolution 466, and that was created in Colombia, we had an interesting strategy for measurement, but we wanted to measure in a way that we could trace, that we can compare with other numbers and having real data. Technology is inaccurate, I will have to say. There's different technologies that are not as accurate as people may think. So we built a program from 2022, and we included our own cameras, and we did a bottom-up measurement with one of the companies, which is here, by the way, and we did HISIS simulations in addition to our processes to understand where do we have these leaks. Furthermore, we took some chromatographies for contrast. We joined OEMP last year, and in our first report, we were congratulated, by the way, because we were one of the largest 10 companies, such as Philips, because the data that we provided was transparent. the commitment of the company was such that we were able to move progress and reduce more than 42,000 equivalent tons. And what we do is, once we start measuring, we associate it in our system with routines. For example, changing some spares, installing new facilities, changing infrastructure, which was leading to having more methane emissions. And also part of the gas that we were burning, it was used on energetic processes. So it helped us understood that we were having inefficiencies. I believe our company has been transparent, and that's why we have become an example to follow due to our results. Yes, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Omar Bueno. I am the manager of safety and environment from Repsol. Repsol has global presence. We have lots of commitments, lots of challenges that we have received from our management. And the main challenge throughout the different business lines that we have deployed, not only in Peru. Peru, yes, it's giving us an opportunity to have a different business portfolio, but we also have gas stations downstream, and everything is distributed globally. The main component from our high management is to be carbon neutral up to 2050 within the framework of the Paris Agreement. And we are one of the corporations that has joined this global initiative. In order to do this, we have deployed pledges, actions. We included, in a short term, by the way, we included suppression of the routine flares, as was mentioned in the morning. This commitment is important into 2030, particularly into the upstream. For this, we have had commitments of global initiatives like the UN within the OGMP 2.0 project. So I believe that what this does is having more robust data and having more accuracy, and to be able to quantify it and have an action resulting from this. So we have a standard goal. We have developed all of our initiatives. We are currently in level 4. We're aiming to reach level 5. This would imply, of course, not only a commitment, but a deployment within different operations. In Peru, we are going to work with some technologies to be deployed that has been identified in other business units, and we believe that this could give us some results. This is complemented with all the operation campaigns, like, for example, cameras, in order to have more precision when it comes to fugitive emissions. Not only finding these emissions, but also quantifying it. And incorporating this in our inspection plan and maintenance plan. It is important to do early actions once we find something. And something that we're facing in the business unit, particularly in the Peruvian jungle, is the fact that we have developed lots of technology in the field. And now the challenge would be to be more aggressive regarding energetic efficiency. We're looking to improve our efficiency in our compression machines, which are actually part of our regular activity. And what we're looking for is to minimize our carbon footprint and methane emissions. One of the objectives within the corporate plan, only talking about methane, by the way, it's to get to zero, even below 0.5% of methane up to 2030 in all of our operations. And this is some of the commitments that we are tackling as a company. Great. I would like to thank the three of you, and particularly for Ana and Juan Carlos. What has been the learning curve when translating the pledges into concrete actions and something that we could measure within each of your companies? Well, this has been a long track for us because we needed to understand how is our facilities how are our facilities behaving right now. Our associated gas is rich in CO2, but not as much in methane. So that's why tracking methane is complicated for us. So it would be complicated for us to understand and to consider some processes. But the learning curve to understand how are we going to mitigate these fugitive emissions is to understand how we can apply different technologies. For example, the flare that we have in some of our facilities was a flare that was rich in CO2. It was low in methane, but there was really high content of heavy liquids. So what we had was an installation of a small refinery with 3 phases of compression with the stabilization among the processes. And in this way, we created optimal gases for electricity. The funny thing is that for over 36 years, we were burning gas, and we didn't even notice that it was more than 1 million cubic feet of gas. And the problem was that you could not re-inject it because there were no other machines that could use it. But with the implementation of this gas-to-liquid machines, we were able to produce 600 barrels of hydrocarbons that were perfectly stabilized. We could say that we have had several cases in which we have learned how to mitigate the methane emissions and suppressing the flares. Basically, the flares, if we try thinking about numbers and the calculations, we know that it's 98% or 99% of numbers that are not as real due to the flare. So the idea was to suppress these emissions. The other learned lessons is that we have involved professionals. We have taught people on methane mitigation, and these experts are working in our daily operations. They have learned how to fix the leaks, how to register them, and they have learned how to solve everything and having traceability of it. So I believe that we have had many phases. We were able to reduce more than 70% of our methane emissions in just 3 years. So the struggle here was to understand, is this data reliable or not? Because technologies are not reliant as they could be. That's why we need to contrast between the top-down, bottom-up, chromatographers, HISIS simulations, and sometimes you use tools that are not as quantitative but more qualitative in order to understand what's the quality, and that will be a contrast of data. And I think that this has helped us to interpret what we have when it comes to technology. Thank you. All right. Regarding Petroecuador, I will have to say that learning has been sustained throughout the years. I think that I don't need to repeat this, but the data collection, reliability of the data, it's relevant. The road has been rocky. We needed to collect information. We had 1,000 assets, 1,000 infrastructures or machineries in the Ecuadorian jungle, which is the most activity of our company. So learning, including monitoring the machinery as well. Not only one person, we're talking about a team of people. We're talking about safety and environmental departments working together, and this has helped us to have a baseline. We have a projection of such mitigation plans, but the learning here, basically the base of this will be cooperation. Without internal or external cooperation, everything gets more complex. We have had support from an external provider, which is Carbon Limits. They have helped us to estimate the methane emissions. We have had the work with Clean Tax 4. Basically, they have helped us to measure in a beginning phase in order to have estimates according to the company. We have had the PENUMA, this is the Ministry of Environment, along with several organizations that had helped us to receive data. And this data, it still needs to be consolidated, but we continue having a sustained commitment, particularly from our personnel. Like I'm mentioning, we are 4 women from Ecuador, which is we are all holding this project, all of us, so it's a challenge, a true challenge for us. Yes, thank you. All right, let's go farther into detail here. Omar, maybe you could mention where are you located as Repsol for operational-wise, and what actions has been taken to have methane emission reduced, or something that could help us to achieve some lessons learned on application. If you can help me with some photographs. Yes, thank you. Okay, so what I was saying, Repsol has a series of business lines, okay? We're devoted to several things. We are on the first chain of value. We could see our production fields. In the map there, in the lilac area or purple area, this is the Sagari field. Yes, this is lot 57. This is close to the Camisea project. Yes, this is the natural gas project. The whole train or set of production is one of the main contributors of natural gas in the country. So we are in an area where we have a large biodiversity. This would be a hot spot, if you will. And from the beginning, you could see that this was involved in the design. We needed to be quite rigorous on the engineering and construction. And you have some views here. We are in the middle of the jungle, and what we're doing there is to minimize impact on our footprint, but also in our operations. And here is where we could see in the next slide that we have some additional facilities. In this photograph, for example, we could see one of the facilities of our main activities. The Unit 400 is our gas compression unit, and this is where we have the highest consumption of energy. We have done a series of actions that started with energetic inefficiencies because we needed to monitor consumption. In the beginning, in this project, we used the emission factors, but we started going into detail with the granulometry of data, and we identified values with the technologies of UE cameras. We also started doing chromatography tests in order to work with the data. Now, we have a view of Sagari AX. This is where we produce gas. We have a series of flanged joints that we actually need to continue monitoring because that's the only way that we could avoid leaks. They need to be properly closed. So from the fugitive emissions point of view, this has helped us if we do, for example, early detection and we find that there's a flange which is not properly tight, we could mitigate this. Like I mentioned, we need to have multidisciplinary team that knows about this technology. This has implied training to our personnel, maintenance training as well, and we have been growing in order to have methane reductions. And other technology, like I'm going to mention, we are going to include drones in order to accredit level 5 in our assets. Also, we need to analyze other technology from some engineering work that we have been working on with some consultants to have alternative sources of energies and changing our energetic matrix. I think that would be my response. Thank you. Thank you, Omar. And continuing with these particular cases, I would like to invite Ana and Juan Carlos. Maybe you guys can share a success case of emission reduction that you could believe that could be highly replicable or something that could be happening in other regions within your companies. Yes, for Petroecuador, when it comes to the coastal areas in the south in Ecuador, we actually have an offshore platform. What we do is basically extract natural gas, and this natural gas goes to a dehydration plant, and then it goes to a plant which is called Bajo Alto. This is a liquefaction plant, and we perform its operation in order to obtain natural gas and provide gas to the south side of the country and also the community through a pipeline. In this plant, the condition was that we had a rejection gas. So the idea was to use such gas to reuse this in other processes to generate energy. Bajo Alto plant is neighboring to a plant which is called Cenel. What do? Basically, we generate energy. This type of arrangement or installation was to use this rejection gas in order to reuse this with compressor and gas duct or gas pipeline and be reduced without being disposed. So this reorganization enabled us to relocate this and take this to Thermogas Machala. Basically, this is the name of this facility. So this is a project that enabled us to reuse 6 million tons of cubic meters per year, and we have completed this project in June 2024, and up to June 2025, we have received such results. According to the calculation of these emissions, we were able to decrease 11,400 tons of CO2 per year. Of course, this contributes to the quality of air in the region near to the communities in order to decrease waste or emissions that could be generated going into the community. And we have avoided the visual impact. We have a benefit of $800,000 million a year, and this has enabled us to evaluate the continuity of the same and have this as a success case.
Thank you. So according to what we discussed in the beginning, every facility has its own print. The gas going out, the amount, the pressure, the quality. In our case, at every facility, we have set a different project to reduce methane emissions and to remove flaring or eliminate flaring. In a special facility, the Alta gas was always used by the power provider to provide part of the electricity that we used. That was high pressure gas, but the low pressure gas was always disposed. So we even set up many processes that at the end we had mainly the compressors that mixed low and high pressure gas and making some changes to the engines and to build a system for discharge a bit different in the facility in case of events that we would not be able to have full reliability in the facility. And so we were able to mix this gas, utilizing all of it to generate electricity. So most of what we were burning for years was low pressure gas. And we really noticed that in spite of the internal combustion engines, sometimes it's not easy for them to receive blended gas due to the low quality of low pressure gas, but we were able to pull it off. Another success story was what I told of before, this that I explained, which was liquid masses. This is the highest MPV that the company has. It is a $38 million project for only 10 years. So it is a project with a payback that is spectacular of 1.8 years. And truly, that gas to liquid process is not complicated to install. The liquid to gas process to recover these hydrocarbons, in our case, we're not selling it apart. And these liquids could have a even higher value, but we're in a complicated part of the country where these liquids cannot be transported due to security issues, so we blend it in with our production. These 700 barrels produced in this gas-to-liquid process, we blend it with the 45,000 barrels of production, and simply they become part of the inventory. And in other facilities that are more isolated and even smaller, what we're using are some systems with packeted engines, which is a motor with a screwer. So the same gas linked to the well, it goes through brief refinement and it is used to produce electricity directly. So this is how we're removing most flaring and most of our methane emissions by tweaking every facility. We cannot have a one-size-fits-all project, but each has its own different footprint. And there is another one that is very remote where we have no more to do than to burn it because the network is at 58 kilometers. Our energy consumption is too low at that well, 250 kilowatts, and the gas production is more than 300,000 cubic feet that we need to combust. And we have no means to transport anything, so we're coming up with some friends which can even be data mining to be consumed at the site to generate its power, and somehow it's benefiting the project and we are not flaring that gas, but we are using it as energy. So the possibilities are many and we have already been implementing most. Excellent. Thank you so much to the both of you. Very interesting, these cases. Now, we're moving on to collaboration, synergies, alliances that we also mentioned that are very important to achieve more effective results. And José Carlos, I would like for you to tell us how to work jointly on a strategy to contribute to cutting back on methane emissions. Thank you. Before anything, congratulations for this effort. You have been showing us how investments are being put to value with regards to technological improvements and identifying information, which is so important and which is identified with as a great challenge to the methane industry still. And I believe that by listening to you, I see that and comparing, looking at what we have, so a concern on funding for this kind of efforts with regards to reducing emissions, and on the other hand, the private sector, I see their initiatives that are interesting, that surely the investment put in is not a minor thing, and which has achieved significant outcomes. That calls me to say or ask, what do we need to do? We need to begin doing it first, to demonstrate it, then to share it, and then to see how we can begin collaborating and understanding that every space, every situation has a different solution, but every solution can contribute to a future solution. So I believe there, the space, Irene, seems to me there needs to be a joint effort not only from the private sector and private companies, but also from governments. And so international cooperation, it is sometimes difficult. In my previous life, I got to know cooperation, its perspective from the inside, and I see that definitely there are matters that are somewhat difficult to touch with regards to contribution to climate change and the more, but I believe we need to take one step further if we want to achieve an outcome that is to everyone's benefit, and that goes through not only sharing these experiences, I hope much more can be done on this, but also having a place where you can receive this sharing and where you can do research based on these cases and to replicate and to achieve having somebody in charge who can actually obtain funding for this kind of thing, because ultimately the energy transition goes through doesn't go through stopping to use one resource for another. It is a transition, so you need to see how gradually you change and when you begin using a resource, because it is really important for power and the GDP of countries, particularly in Latin America. But on the other hand, we also need to begin working in everything pertaining to research, investigation, understanding how this can be useful, how the efforts being undertaken by the colleagues who have just told about them in each of their countries, how this can be applicable to other countries where we also have significant methane emissions. So I believe there is a challenge, a major challenge, in the sense of achieving buying the battle, or buying in and putting to use what private companies are doing. So based on that, we can know, research, and see where else it can be applied, who else can contribute to this. Let's break away with that 2% that the World Bank mentions. Let's go upward, because if in the end you tackle the matter on reducing methane emissions, you'll be able to contribute much more to what we have set for ourselves in Paris. Unfortunately, I'm a skeptic. I believe we will not reach 1.5. I'll be sincere, and I'll give out the bad news. I believe we will not get there, but I believe we need to do everything possible to be close to that. And so if we're focusing on industries such as methane, I believe we're taking a step larger than merely focusing on carbon dioxide. Yes, totally agree. And just a note here, highlighting the effort that has been presented by Alejandra a while ago, and I fully expect the community of practice in the observatory aims to putting this to work, and from ARPEL we're also working much and for many years now in sharing experiences and best practices, but of course it is more focused on within the sector or inside the sector, so that's the road we are on. And speaking on collaboration now, I would like to for both Ana, Juan Carlos, and Omar, Ana, and Juan Carlos tell us about collaborating with governments or regulating entities to accelerate actions of your companies regarding methane. Also considering alliances between peers or companies in the sector as well. Thank you. Well, to talk about this part, in our experience in the Repsol Corporation, we've had the chance that the journey followed regarding the many assets dispersed in different continents allowed us to acquire certain knowledge and learning that was interesting to share, not only in-house but also outside, which is why I can refer to two events that we've had as a group. The first being in Northern Africa, where we have operations for oil and gas, where a work group was set up and a community of practice, and good practices were shared with operators in the area, including regulating entities and authorities, in order to lead to awareness on the matter of managing emissions with an emphasis on methane. It was very well taken up. I believe there was a pretty interesting capture and compliance of goals for that event. And the other thing is something we mobilized under collaboration of SPH here in Lima last year, where precisely along with our headquarter team and operating companies here in Peru, we had the chance to show or to demo somewhat what each of us were doing at different fora, the part of upstream, midstream, and even downstream with regards to emissions management. And it was interesting to see how we had common points and several other things where friendly companies had managed differently to our own. So we can also conceive it from a different view and to consider the positive results. So the idea is to continue working along that line, not only from the private domain, but as has been well mentioned, but including also teams from our counterpart in government, where precisely jointly we can achieve greater impact and to amplify the actions that we can undertake. Thank you. In our case, we've had, as I mentioned already, international cooperation that has helped us to strengthening technical capacities and supporting the process of gathering inventory. But it is also important to mention country-to-country cooperation. With our brother country, Colombia, with Ecopetrol, we have maintained a program for monitoring or surveillance. Ecopetrol is somewhat more advanced on this matter, which has allowed us to have an exchange on good practices, which happened at Ecopetrol to assume them as part of the road that Petroecuador will take on the road to decarbonization. It has been a program that has nurtured us much. It has been exchanging experiences mutually that has allowed us to advance. We've also had the chance to approach the regularization agency in Ecuador. In the Ministry of Energy, we have a regularization agency under it that is currently drafting the norm for methane in Ecuador. This has allowed us to have engagement so that all efforts already taken by the company to be considered to begin aligning somewhat with regards to hydrocarbon regulation and to begin aligning efforts already taken by the company as not to have a law that is over-regulated or that is not according to the reality of the country. Because just like other brother countries in Latin America, truly our reality is different to Europe's or the United States. Our reality and our mindset, our national reality, the reality of each of the companies is different. And we need to be aware of that and to align public policies and legislation according to that. That has been the cases of cooperation and support that we've had. Thank you. We can say we've had alliances and cooperation both locally and internationally. Based on the resolution that you mentioned in Colombia that was issued in 2022, that was seen by all of us as something extremely complicated to fulfill at that point. in the short term, we began understanding that truly we had many opportunities that we had not been executing in our fields. And it is curious, but this is one of the few times when, as operators, the many operators at Ecopetrol, which is like the father to all in Colombia, we began banding together to review what we would do, how to achieve fulfilling the resolution, how to optimize costs, how to have a project where measurement not only had a positive NPD, and what is it that companies demanded from us, how to achieve doing something that was feasible among all, or for all. So when we began taking measurements, we began with some workshops and some synergies under leadership of Ecopetrol or sometimes NIH. We began looking into how to fulfill the regulation and how to build a fully auditable program and transparent program for measurement and mitigation. For example, with the major companies, when we did flyovers with the top-down and with other companies, we always talked how it would be more economical for us, as we are many departments in Colombia, but the oil extracting areas are in the south, including Arauca. So we will overfly those areas with the company, and we all did for the same facilities in the area, which was more economical for us. Now for TEA efficiency, we're thinking about the same, to bring in cameras that are now quantitative. They are pretty expensive. The Gamantis, or Angidescencia are extremely expensive, but when one brings them in jointly to measure the same areas, costs are reduced significantly. So the cost for TEA is reduced significantly. So we have achieved with these companies to build synergies that are very interesting. Many of these initiatives we are sharing constantly with Ecopetrol, but I do believe that methane, with our very competitors nationwide, has joined us all together. So we have very interesting synergies with regards to emissions, particularly on methane. And internationally, we have linked to OGNP that has brought in interesting experiences for us. Those meetings that they hold every 8 or 15 days with the major companies such as Shell or others on how they have achieved the gold standard and how their programs, by the size of the companies, are to square. Ours are more recursive generally, as every facility is unique, both in security and operations. For example, in some fields we cannot fly too low, otherwise we'll have problems with security. The first thing being affected is the plane. So we need to accommodate to these matters to every facility, but we have achieved setting up these synergies with the different companies. So I believe there has been a very good cooperation. I believe there has been a major union with suppliers so that we can recommend to them how they can perform these measurements in complicated areas, how we can extract some data that is totally traceable, and how we can really optimize the costs, which is most of what a program such as this hopes to do. Excellent. Truly, this has been quite hopeful content to this point. I would like for José Carlos, to ask you one last question, but from a different perspective, because I would like for you to tell on the challenges as well. Not everything is flowers or rose color. There's still a path ahead and many obstacles to overcome. So, as a summary, I would like for you to tell us, what do you consider is the greatest challenge today in reducing methane emissions in the mining and energy industry in the region? Well, that question is a challenge in itself. What I see is that there are very positive experiences from the companies that are tackling jointly. We are hearing how they're working with suppliers and the other local companies. But you were saying this, ARPEL is working much jointly from the sector. How can we achieve for the counterpart? And when I say counterpart, I don't only mean the public sector, but academia, civil society. How can we achieve so that we can all take one step forward in order to contribute to this duty? I believe there are very important experiences that have just been mentioned to us that we need to put to value. I believe that part of what is needed is also telling the story for people to know what is being done, for people to know why it is being done, and for also people to know what is the impact of what's being done. Because, as I was saying, we have this whole TCFD route, this framework to look into and prevent decarbonization. When I talk to many companies, and here we are all knowledgeable and you know much on methane and the more, but consumers of power, the other companies that are part of not necessarily the ecosystem nearby to methane, they are not putting to value or not differentiating much on whether it's methane or CO2. For them, it's decarbonization, and that's it. And that has happened to me with other industries, talking to CEOs and VPs. In the end, for them, I'm decarbonizing, that's it. But how? As long as I fulfill my goal, I'm fine. So I believe part of that is a little bit of knowledge and telling the full story. Because, okay, if you're decarbonizing, how much is on this and on the other? Why is that important in your process? How much can you contribute? A little contribution to decrease methane will be 10 times more than what you're doing for CO2. For example, where is that gap? That obviously a company working in oil and gas is doing it because this is a part of their core business and responsibility. But a company that is mainly consumer, not necessarily will they have it clear. And I believe that is part of education that we would have to work on with them, with these other companies on one hand. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. I believe not. But I do feel, as you've said, there's hope by the efforts being undertaken, and I believe we need to go further beyond. Excellent. Yes, thank you so much, José Carlos. Thank you all. We have a few minutes for questions. I'm not sure if there are any. There in the back. I'm not sure if they can have a microphone handed to them. Please, if you can introduce yourself and to say who you're addressing the question to. Apologies, we cannot hear in the interpretation booth. There's always a question in the territory from two visions. One, the economic aspect. What is the investment, or what is the resource that will stop being perceived by government if they do this transition? That is the first question for Peru and Ecuador, also from our expert from Petroecuador. And then if they will stop revenue or income, if that will be reduced, if we're going to move ahead with this transition, what will be the income? Because after this transition, we should continue perhaps with the same production, with the same resources, in order to have the investment that corresponds. So I have this major question. And even so, last week from Pachacuti, we presented a draft bill that reads, eliminate the new or even limiting the new concessions for exploitation of resources related to oil and mining. And we have been asked, well, and then, and of course, under this logic of energy transition, and they are asking us in the territory how much will be saved and how much will be received. Finally, what is the cost benefit for the country stopping this economic activity and focusing on other duties that allow us to reduce what we are saying, the major effects of climate change, the major effects to the rights of nature, and even more so, the major tramplings to human rights. So I would like to understand a bit more the figure, the number, how much is saved, how much is gained. Finally, how will we survive in every state? Thank you so much.
Buena pregunta, gracias. Está desafiante.
Good question, and thank you. It is challenging. I will try to quote something that has been said here, and I will even refer to the video that was shown here after lunch regarding natural gas and the reflection of the energy transition. So, the point, more than asking about the cost of a specific solution where we would need to look into the case study, we are in a global fork in the road, in that if we don't change the way to do things, we will have problems. And I would even say we're already having them. Particularly, who's speaking in his past lives, to quote others, I've been head of the field at Lot 57, and back then I was telling some of you that in that operation in the rainforest of Cusco, we had 2 cold waves yearly when the temperature decreased down to 14 degrees Celsius, which affected not only thermodynamic efficiency of equipment, but especially the communities in the area. So back then, there were 2 or 3 cold waves yearly. That was back in 2013. Now in 2025, we have 14 cold waves, which entails a change in the life condition of our communities. A climate issue that generates intense rain or intense drought. This morning, it was said that if we don't do something today, we will be paying it later, having to rebuild what nature took away due to these climate alterations. So, actually, the question would be, what should I do now so we can avoid that greater impact in the future? Because there's already impact. It's undeniable to say that there is no impact. So, from our perspective as a company, and this is shared by our higher management, we are not speaking of a solution. We even, some time ago, if you have not seen it, the brand Repsol has suffered a rebranding. More than changing the color of a symbol, it is making visible what for some time we have been trying to do along this way of the energy transition. We are not an oil and gas company anymore. We are a multi-energy company. And why? Because the energy transition requires all possible sources. But not only all possible sources, but doing it properly for each of these sources. And what is on us to do, here's where oil and gas comes in, is to identify precisely those opportunities in order to reduce our impact. There is a phrase that we have in home. If we want to have more barrels of production equal to oil and so on, they are more but also better barrels. These are barrels where their carbon impact or footprint is the least possible. And it will not be zero, clearly, which is why we have the other energies coming in. Renewables, technologies that perhaps in a standard oil and gas companies were not mentioned, but they are part of the solution in this equation that is so complex of climate change. So beyond a specific question on how much it can cost a solution or not, I believe that a reflection in these gathering, it's important to remind that if we don't do something now, accounts will continue growing, not only in the private domain, but especially affecting our communities or neighbors.
Thank you, Omar. I think we're right on time to wrap up with this panel. I don't want to go further with time. There's one question more, but we are a bit delayed on the agenda. And I think that in the coffee break, you could go to the panelists and ask them questions directly. Just a last comment before closing would be the cost definitely will be high, but we need to think about what are we sacrificing? And the balance depends on each country. There's not a single solution or a unique solution for every country. We need to put things in a scale and weigh things in, and we need to do lots of sacrifices as a society. Within our region, our sectors, we're doing what we can, but this is an effort involving all society in general. Thank you. And we want to thank Olade as well.